5.
Hold the camera still.
4, 3, 2, 1, go. Word to you, Marla. My name's Steve, this channel is Rags to Riches. Thank you for tuning in. Now, for those of you that have followed my channel for a while, or you listen to the Shits And Giggles podcast, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Prada L'Homme. As you can see, I have finished like a good 3/4 of this bottle now. It's a fragrance I love. I bought it a good couple of years ago. It was Jeremy Fragrance that influenced me. Well, more accurately, it was Lara, when she was on Jeremy Fragrance's channel, that said how much she loved it. That's what actually influenced me and drove me to blind buy this fragrance. Now, I really enjoy it. It's a great, solid, clean fragrance for work. As everybody knows, it's kind of like fresh linen type vibe. Now, I really want to try, I've mentioned this on the podcast recently, I really want to try Prada L'Homme Intense. Now, I don't really want to spend too much money on it, and it's quite expensive at the minute, and being a blind buyer, I don't kind of want to take a punt on it. But while I was shopping around, I did end up seeing a really good deal on this. So that's Prada L'Homme Low. So basically, this video is comparing these two. Before I get into this, the first thing I want to say is these two are not night and day. They're not worlds apart. So when I talk about the differences and my preferences and how they do differ, just remember that I'm not talking about like major differences here. The differences are there, they're noticeable, but it's relatively subtle. So if you like one, you'll like the other, and I'll discuss kind of my preferences and maybe which one you should get or why you should get both or not, etc. So I'm not going to talk about this one much, which is the original Prada L'Homme. The reason being, I've spoken about it loads on my YouTube channel, and most of you are really familiar with it now because it's been around a long time. As you know, it's very heavy and prominent in iris. It's a very clean, sweet, kind of mass appealing iris. That works really well in an office environment, which is why it always appears in people's office list videos. What I will say is, if you're not a big iris fan, that you might not like love this fragrance, but I don't think many people are going to actively dislike it, and that's why this is so safe. So how does it kind of compare to Prada L'Homme Low? Well, the differences for me happen most at the top. As I said earlier, the differences aren't dramatic, but they're at the most different at the top in the opening for me. So in that sort of first 20 to 25 minutes, Prada L'Homme Low has kind of got this sort of fresher, zingier, sort of citrusy-like opening. Now, there's no citrusy notes listed, so I reckon that citrus accord comes from that neroli that is listed in there. And also there's ginger in there as well, which gives it this extra kind of fresher sort of zing in the opening. Now, as I said, the opening is where it's most different, but for me, the opening on Prada L'Homme Low is not its best stage. It doesn't smell bad, but for me, it's probably when I dislike it the most, actually. It's because that neroli and that sort of citrusy, zingier accord make it smell a bit more like a generic air freshener. I don't want to say toilet cleaner because that sounds offensive, but yeah, it's kind of got this just a little bit more of a sort of, yeah, it's not like an air freshenery type smell, because it's not quite as sweet as the Prada L'Homme. As I say, it's got these other elements, these citrusy kind of accords coming through. But yeah, it's not at its best. So for me, this comes into its own after about 20 or 25 minutes. After about 20 or 25 minutes, this starts to settle down a little bit more, and the neroli and the ginger die down a little bit, and then the iris becomes a little bit more prominent. So that's when these two start smelling a little bit more similar. But again, what I will say is Prada L'Homme Low in the dry down is probably even safer than Prada L'Homme. The reason being, as I said earlier, if you don't like iris, Prada L'Homme is probably going to be a bit more divisive because it's just so iris dominant, at least to me. Where Prada L'Homme Low has a little bit more, the iris isn't as full on and dominant, and it is a little bit lighter, a little bit fresher. So it kind of gives it the sort of a little bit more going on. So it's just not all about the iris. So I think this is probably even safer than Prada L'Homme. And it's probably like more complex because, as I say, it's actually got more going on in many ways. So it's got more to it. So in many ways, even though it's safer, if you're frag head, it's probably more interesting, which is rare. You don't sort of find many fragrances that are safer yet more interesting. So. And really, that's the main difference. Prada L'Homme just remains this very prominent, sweet, full-on iris kind of fragrance, which I actually prefer to. It's like my favourite iris fragrance. I prefer it to like Dior Homme, etc. Where Prada L'Homme Low is still very much iris, but it's got these other elements going on. So it's a bit more interesting. It's a bit fresher, almost a bit greener and a bit lighter. So it is a bit more suitable for, I wouldn't even say high heat actually because of the iris, but in warmer days, so warmer spring days or sort of cooler summer evenings, etc. then Prada L'Homme Low is probably going to be a little bit more effective and less cloying or choking than Prada L'Homme. So which is better, I guess is the question, and which should you own? Should you own both? Now, I asked both my son, who's sort of 5, nearly 6 years old, and my wife. I asked them independently. So not the best cross-section of people, I appreciate, but you know, COVID and all that shit. I'm sure you want me to ask some hot young 20-year-old. Unfortunately, I don't have access to those. But yeah, perhaps I will one day, and I'll be able to afford them. Anyway, so I asked them, and they both said that they smell quite similar. But my son went for Prada L'Homme, and my wife went for Prada L'Homme. They both just enjoyed that. I think again the iris is kind of sweeter. It's a bit more sort of powdery and probably mass appealing, where this is just a little bit more strange. It's more interesting, yet it's also a little bit more kind of generic at the same time. It's interesting because it's got more going on, but these other elements just make it a little bit more air freshenery, and I think that's why they sort of just preferred the sort of sweeter kind of Prada L'Homme. So which one do I prefer is a good question. Now it's taken me a while to kind of decide this really, because they are, as I say, they're not night and day, they're not dramatically different. And in the dry down, I actually really like Prada L'Homme Low. I really like both fragrances, but I've finally come to the conclusion that, so I would wear both. I'd happily own both and wear both. And I think Prada L'Homme would be sort of, you could probably wear that in winter, but sort of spring, autumn, Prada L'Homme Low, probably sort of warmer spring, summer, etc. But for me, I think I still prefer the OG, the original Prada L'Homme, because it's just a little bit sort of sweeter, a little bit almost kind of fuller, but this one's a bit more complex. But yeah, I just think it's just a bit kind of nicer, and actually, to contradict slightly what I said earlier, the fact that it is full on iris makes it a bit more of a kind of standout fragrance in many ways. So I prefer Prada L'Homme compared to Prada L'Homme Low. That's not to say Prada L'Homme Low is a bad fragrance, because it's not. Should you own it? Now, if you don't own either of these fragrances, I would say potentially where you live might affect it. If you're in a warmer climate, you might want to kind of go for Prada L'Homme Low, but I would probably recommend you go for the original. If you are a big Prada L'Homme fan, you might want to go for Prada L'Homme Low if you want to wear this more often throughout the year and kind of have those warmer days you can reach for this version. But other than that, if you're not in a really warm climate, if you're not a massive strong Prada L'Homme fan, I would say there's probably no need to own both. Just pick one or the other. So maybe go in store, smell which one, smell both and see which one you prefer. But you know, also try Prada L'Homme Intense, which I'm yet to get my nose on, annoyingly. So there you go. I've not really told you anything you probably didn't know. Prada L'Homme Low is a fresher version of Prada L'Homme. Big fucking surprise. But thank you for watching anyway. Do let me know which is your favourite Prada L'Homme in the comments below. Have you smelled Prada L'Homme Intense? I'm jealous. I'm going to try and get a sample still. There's also Prada L'Homme Absolute, which is one of the podcast listeners has strongly recommended to me. He says that is the best one, but I think that's discontinued now, but I don't know. Anyway, do comment below, let me know, and thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe and all that shit, and stay tuned to the channel because I will be uploading more videos soon, and I've got a brand new release for 2021 coming in my next video, so stay tuned. Take care, much love.